Hi, I'm Carmen Wild, and this is Business Without Barriers, the show proving we can break through barriers if we bring humanity back to business. So get ready to be inspired. Our guest today is a woman worth watching. Dr. Gladys Ato is a former university president and clinical psychologist, speaker, and author of The Good Goodbye: How to Navigate Change and Loss in Life, Love, and Work. She mentors entrepreneurs to become industry thought leaders and teaches communities to amplify their leadership in times of uncertainty using the Good Goodbye approach. Recognized as a Latino leader by the Hispanic Executive Magazine and winner of the Woman Worth Watching in Education Award, Gladys has also been featured in Forbes, TEDx Lincoln Square, NPR, NBC News, and The Unmistakable Creative, to name a few. When not working, Gladys travels with her pup Lovebug, hunting for stylish treasures and satisfying her foodie palate. Gladys is a dynamic, highly energized, and passionate mentor. And in the next hour, we get to bask in her insights on how to navigate uncertain times and rise triumphant. A very warm welcome to you, Gladys. I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Oh, I'm excited to be here, Carmen, and just so grateful that you've created such an amazing platform for all of us during this pivotal time in history. So thank you for this opportunity.
It's such a pleasure. So I want to start out with the love of your life. Tell us about that time that Lovebug ended up in the Forbes magazine alongside you.
Yeah. Well, there's not much of a story there if you know me well, because Lovebug is attached to my hip. So anywhere I go, this little girl comes with me. And, you know, she and I have been together for 4 years. I adopted her when she was 11 months old, and she's going to be 5 at the end of 2020. And it was not a love at first sight experience, actually. I was in a place where I knew that I was ready to bring a companion animal home. And I was very deliberate about taking my time and not rushing into a decision. And when I saw her, there was a moment where my heart broke. I felt the heartbreak in my heart and tears filling my eyes. But my sister reminded me, she said, Gladys, you're going to find that experience with any dog in a shelter, because that's what they pull from you, is just that heartache. And I went and visited her every day for an entire week because I wanted to make sure I was making the right decision, but I also wanted to observe her. And I immediately noticed that she was not social. As soon as they put us into a room together to play and meet, she ran up to me, gave me a kiss on the cheek, and then she never looked at me again. She went to her own side of the room. I would try to engage her with a toy. She would sniff the toy, but then go do her own thing. And she always had her back to me. And I thought, ooh, this might be an antisocial dog. Do I want a dog that's that independent and aloof? Yeah. But every day going back, I noticed that she was actually very attached to the volunteers at the shelter. And I realized that this was more just a byproduct of the trauma that she had come from, where she didn't realize that all humans were safe, and that she was actually needing time to attach to me. And so that began our journey of really starting to understand how to coexist together. And then that led to us bonding in some really powerful ways. And now, I mean, everybody knows Lovebug's my sidekick, and I just couldn't be happier and so blessed to have her in my life.
Absolutely. And she couldn't have found the most perfect parent to bring her out of the trauma and into absolute lovedom.
Yeah. For both of us, it's been such an incredible journey.
So cute. And that name Lovebug is just the cutest name that I've ever heard. So, so Gladys, you're like this never-ending fountain of bubbles. From the first moment I think of you, I think of champagne and bubbles and happiness. But I know life wasn't always like that. For you, it wasn't that easy growing up. I know just a tiny little bit about your mom. Tell us about how your childhood shaped you into what we see today.
Yeah, Carmen, it is amazing to see where I've come from, and to then to be, to hear people describe me in this way as effervescent and light and full of positive energy. And I will tell you, I grew up in a really interesting household where every morning my dad would wake my sister and I up and say, "What a beautiful day it is today," and have us stand in the mirror and tell ourselves that we love ourselves and really pump us up with positivity. And at the same time, we as a family really struggled. So there was this dichotomy of being positive, but also really going through some very challenging moments. And as a little girl, because I was born into this world an introvert, and I was also shy, and I was also just scared of my environment, my school, peers, all of that felt very unsafe to me. There really was this process of me going inward and trying my best to be invisible in life. And this is something that I know really shaped me in my early years, is if I could not be seen, if I could not attract attention, I could then be safe. And so I literally did this pulling in as a little girl, my eyes always looking down, but I was constantly wanting affection. I was constantly wanting connection. And for some reason, I didn't give up that I might one day be accepted by my peers. I might one day feel safe in this world. I might one day bring peace to chaos. And that kept me going. But I won't say that I was always this like cheery, happy little girl. I was quiet and I was very subdued. But the things that have kept me going in life have always been this deep trust in humanity, and an amount of optimism that is, it's infinite for me. I'm not at a lack of optimism for any area of my life. And for those that are listening, optimism doesn't mean that you don't have hardship. It means that in the midst of hardship, you are still able to find your way through. You still know that you're going to learn something amazing. You have faith that you're going to come out of this stronger. And that was it was bred in me because of how I was raised by both of my parents. So I've gone through, half of my life feeling like I was my worst enemy. Mm-hmm. I struggled with depression. I struggled with massive anxiety. I was completely disgusted with who I was as a human being. Anything that happened externally, if there was any situation where I was not met wholeheartedly, or I felt like things didn't go the way I wanted, opportunity for me to look at my path every single day. What am I doing wrong? What am I not enough of? What am I too much of? And then trying to shift everything. When you do that, you end up, when you walk that path of trying to just adapt who you are to please other people, you become a people pleaser, number one, but secondly, you become completely detached from yourself. And so much of my my early life and also my adult years, it became a big process of untangling and learning how to step onto a path of understanding what it really means to love yourself wholeheartedly, and to really be so enamored with your own process in life. And that is where the effervescence comes from now. I am fascinated by my life. I'm fascinated by the power that I have to make things happen. And if I can ignite that in other people, I feel like I'm doing a good job by passing that on.
Wow. So, sure. How do you go from, so what I'm hearing you saying, you actually had quite a beautiful balance in so you have the struggle, but you also have this incredible coming through from your parents. But how do you go from being an introvert, which I would never have guessed? That's like a big surprise. Introvert, like really? Woo. So how do you go from that and being detached to crossing this threshold and becoming recognized as a Latino leader and winning the Woman Worth Watching in Education Award? What?
I say yes. Yeah, I say yes to everything. That's how that happened. So let me explain. Back when I was 8 years old, my dad forced me into competitive public speaking. Okay, so saying yes, I'm going to do the public speaking, saying yes, I'm going to be the best at it. That was the expectation in my household. Like my dad really wanted to make sure that my sister and I excelled at everything that we did. So it was like, okay, yes, I'll do it. And fast forward, when I ended up competing in public speaking for a number of years, and I did excel at it, and it became one of my big passions. And then fast forward into adulthood, when I graduated from college, I went to graduate school, became a clinical psychologist, and now I'm entering into the workforce. I constantly said yes to any opportunities that were presented to me, not because I discerned if it was the right thing for me, if I wanted to, but rather, again, I wanted to please people. So, my people pleasing skills got me really far in my career. And I was very blessed that people saw the leadership potential in me. I didn't see it in myself. Again, I was going home and beating myself up for not being beautiful enough, not being white enough, not being vocal enough, not being smart enough, not being witty enough. These were the things that I hated about myself. But for some reason, others at work saw my commitment. They saw my determination. They saw my organizational skills. They saw how much of a woman I was. So they gave me these opportunities. And in that process of being afforded open doors, I learned that, I am a great leader. And this is actually a really challenging path to be on, because leadership is all about self-awareness. It's all about emotional intelligence. And those have always been two driving principles in my life from the get-go. So I felt like it was a beautiful marriage of how I navigated my life, constantly wanting to understand myself and understand others, understand why things are the way they are, but now applying it organizationally. And today, having had, almost 40 years of public speaking experience, I have learned how to be an extrovert. And the switch for me really is about connection. I've always wanted to connect with other people. I've always wanted to feel that sense of bonding and feel the energy that comes when you're in community. These are the things that I didn't have growing up as a girl, because I was ostracized by my peers. I was left out. And now, as a leader, to be able to foster community and foster that sense of belongingness and inclusion, it's amazing that I can be in a position to create that, but also be invited to that by others.
Sure. Such a beautiful transition. And from so many people battle with that introvert, they think they need to be introvert always, and we can be introverted in some areas and some situations, but you've made this beautiful switch. And I love that you've used it as connection. That's what switched it. Is like, well, if you think about it, when you put on a flip a switch, there is a connection, and then you've related it so beautifully to people, which is amazing. So tell us then how this all relates to you being a university president, because at that stage of your life, how much of the extrovert were you, or were you still becoming? Tell us about that, and maybe some of the difficulties for you as a university president.
Yeah, so becoming a university president was not on my career trajectory. Back several years prior, this is back in 2006, I wanted to start teaching at a university because I wanted to keep my public speaking skills fresh. That was my motivation. So I thought, why don't I start teaching? But in that, entering into a university system, I, again, saying yes, wanting to be helpful, wanting to belong to community, was volunteering a lot for different projects, different roles. And soon I became a department chair for undergraduate studies and started to grow that department, later became a vice president of that university. And so all of a sudden, I'm in higher education leadership, and it's a brand new world for me, but it's challenging, and I'm up for the challenge. So the university president role came on in 2013. I was invited to apply for a provost position at the National Hispanic University. And then 6 months into my position, I became the president and the CEO. And that journey, it was a journey like no other. This is one of the pinnacles of my career, because we, as a university, it had been open for 34 years. It was the first 4-year accredited university in the United States for Latinos, specifically for Latinos. This was a really big deal. And as a Latina, I felt so honored to be able to be a part of this community. And unfortunately, after becoming the president, I quickly learned that the board of directors was considering closing the school down. And so my focus of really taking the National Hispanic University national and bringing online education into that platform, because I was an online education expert, all of a sudden shifted to, how do we close the doors? And how do we do it in the most peaceful way possible? And none of us had ever done this before. So it became an immediate crisis of figuring out, how do we transition 1,000 students to either graduate or go to another university and not be negatively impacted by this? How do we transition all our faculty and staff to be laid off, to find other positions? How do I prepare, right, to do the same, because I was going to be the last person to be laid off? And how do we do this with some grace? And I remember, I mean, it was one of the most stressful experiences I've had, that ended up being such a powerful, pivotal moment for me understanding just how transformational leadership can be in times of uncertainty. Because when things are unstable, there is a tendency to want to control and keep as much stable as you can. And what I've noticed that happens in leadership, in organizational leadership, is there's not space to process the grieving of what's changing. And right now we're in a dynamic where globally we're experiencing this. A lot of businesses are closing down. Businesses are trying their best to manage to keep the doors open for one day longer, not knowing if the next day they'll be closing. And in it, we're so focused on the tactical that we lose sight of the emotional. And remember, right, leadership is about self-awareness, emotional intelligence. So that not being interwoven into the process robs us of a chance to deepen our community experience through the transition. And so what I found so powerful at the National Hispanic University was the chance to honor the emotional experience of saying goodbye to this university being open for the Latino community, being open to a new dream of how the Latino community could be served. So the one thing that I knew how to do at that point, that was the only thing that I could offer my community, and I remember we were doing a Thanksgiving potluck with the faculty and staff, is I said to them, I don't know how to do this. I don't have a manual. And in not having a manual, the only thing I had was my own personal philosophy of how to create a good goodbye. And this was a gift that my mom gave me in her passing away from a brain aneurysm in 2003. And so now here I am creating space for us to honor the unknown together as a community, creating space for us to grieve as a community, creating space for us to celebrate as a community, because that's the good goodbye. It's not just focusing on one end of the emotional spectrum, which is what we tend to do in situations of unknown, of chaos, crisis. We focus on one end of the emotional spectrum, which is, for lack of a better word, what we call the negative end. And we don't balance it out by going to the other end, which is the celebration, the joy, the gratitude, the acceptance, understanding, forgiveness. That is the other end. And this is where expansion happens. So our work really as leaders is to create that bridge to both ends of the emotional spectrum for our communities. And in that, you expand your emotional landscape, which helps deepen your community's resilience and their ability to really navigate any storm. And it was such a blessing to be able to experience to get that together at the National Hispanic University with my community there.
Wow. Gladys, in that little bit you've given us is about 10 books in there.
Yeah. Well, one of them you can buy on Amazon. It's called The Good Goodbye. But
By that, especially in today's times, we really need that. So can we unpack it a little bit more? Because you've given us so much beautiful stuff in there, and given where we're at globally, on every single level, there's this convergence of crises happening, and people just don't know. We've got goodbyes going on on so many levels, like you touched on. It's business, income, jobs that are being lost, health that's affected, families are not seeing each other. There's just goodbye to life as we know it, goodbye to the future plans we had. Can you give us just a little bit more, maybe practical steps on how do we say a goodbye to all these things and open up this expansion? Can you just give us a little more around that, please?
Absolutely. So the first step that I start with, and you can read about this in The Good Goodbye, this is the Good Goodbye approach, is acceptance. And, in my research for writing the book, I obviously, as a clinical psychologist, I'm very familiar with change dynamics, right? Change leadership, with the stages of grieving. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, I think for most people, really made her imprint on helping the larger, masses understand grieving through the lens of the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. What happened, and she didn't intend for this to happen, but what happened is that people came to interpret that the final stage is acceptance. That's the goal. We're trying to get to a point of acceptance, and then we're complete. Then our grieving's done. Then we can move forward. But what I have found over and again is that there's so much research that actually starts with acceptance first, and shows how when you start with acceptance, that actually releases you to be able to use your energy in an intentional way towards what you most desire. So step number 1, accept. Accept does not mean you condone. It doesn't mean you've integrated all of the hurt. All it means is that you recognize what's in front of you without trying to change it. That's it. Just recognize what's in front of you without trying to change it. Our world right now is a shitstorm, period.
For sure.
Okay? Yeah. That's it, right? My life right now is unpredictable, period. Okay? That's it. You don't try to change it. You don't try to manipulate it into something. You just see it for what it is. That has so much power. Okay? So if as an organizational leader and you're in a precarious situation, being able to say to your community, we are in a precarious situation right now, and this is our reality. Don't try to fill it by saying, but we'll get out of it soon, or we're going to make the best of it. No, we are in a scary time. This then allows you to go to the next step, which is understanding. And understanding is being able to recognize where you're at, right? And again, making room for the emotional experience. So how do you feel about where we're at right now? Let that be a dialogue with your community. And then where do you want to get to? And this is a very simplified explanation, obviously, for the time we have allotted. But there's a lot of work to do in the in-between, okay? From understand where you are to where you want to be, what's the gap in between? The gap is where you have the power to either focus on the negative or focus too much on the positive, or you can leave the gap unfilled. And this is really hard for leaders to do. But one strategy that I've actually used that I think is so powerful is scenario planning. And scenario planning is a strategy that's been used very much by the military, but also used organizationally to go to the worst case scenario. Right? Because that's what everybody's focused on. So make room for it. Let's talk about the worst case scenario, but also identify best case scenarios and allow yourself to actually engage your creativity to plan for both. And that way you can start to close that gap with intention according to what you most desire. I mean, this is partly vision setting. Third, gratitude. Gratitude is such an important part of our process because, and the way I describe it in my book, gratitude is a healing salve. When you can soften into understanding your situation through the lens of appreciation, when you can look for what you're gaining in this moment. I know this is going to be really hard for some folks to hear that are, I lost my job, my family member's sick, I lost a loved one who died from COVID, I'm dealing with racial tensions in my community. You want me to look for the good in this, Gladys? I get it. But every situation has both a positive and a negative. So gratitude is a way to actively practice seeing the opportunities within the chaos. What do you appreciate about this? And being able to use that as a way to harness that further expansion. And that then takes us to the fourth step, which is forgiveness. And forgiveness, a lot of times when we have a hard time saying goodbye, when we are really feeling stuck, and a quick way to identify it, if there's anything going on currently in your life and you're ruminating on it over and over and over and over and over again, and you can't find peace about it, but it's already done, likely there is an area of opportunity to forgive. And that forgiveness is a chance to be able to, again, not condone, but rather to not allow that situation, person, experience to hold weight on your heart anymore. You're releasing that. You're no longer entrapped by it. And that forgiveness process allows you to then let that experience be. And, my hands letting go, that is saying the goodbye. And for me, one thing that it was really important to do in my book is to give the readers multiple examples of various goodbyes that people had experienced and created in their own lives. So it's not just my stories, but stories of multiple individuals, because I really want people to know that to create a goodbye, you can actually ritualize it. And that ritual in itself is so important to use when we are going through rites of passage. And this is what we're going through right now in humanity. We are going through a major rite of passage. So we use ritual. Ritual has been part of our ancestry for forever. How do we use ritual to really set intentions, to be able to honor what was, to look at milestones, celebrate our progress, and let that be a way of continuing to honor our commitment to parting ways with what no longer will be, with a full heart, and freeing up our space to step into the next threshold of expansion.
Wow, that's so powerful, Gladys. And I don't think you could ever have known how relevant your book would be right now in this moment of humanity.
Yeah.
Those insights are so powerful, and in so many different ways, there is richness in these insights. And I really want to encourage everyone listening to go and buy this book, because we need it. We need, as leaders, as families, parents, wherever we are in life right now, we need to understand how to do this. I heard, watched something Greg Braden was doing, and he actually said that he sat back and he just realized that we're in mourning. The entire world, we're in a grieving process, and we didn't even realize it. And in so many, we tend to think grieving is only about death, but right now there's a death of so many things. Yeah. And if we don't get to that acceptance very quickly, our future, we're just not going to move forward. We're going to stagnate and go even backward. So thank you. That's so, so powerful. You speak about leading from the eye of the storm. Mm-hmm. Tell me about that. Well, I'll leave it there.
Yes. Well, so one thing that I have been really passionate about, and it's interesting, Carmen, because I'm having a flashback right now, and I'm not remembering the full details, but let me just explain what's happening visually for me. Is there was a moment when I realized that so much of my career journey has been navigating crises. And when I look at my personal life where there have been crisis situations, I've been the calm one to show up. Now, granted, I'm a clinical psychologist, right? I have the training, but also I grew up in a really chaotic environment. So from a little girl, I was conditioned to be to be somebody that can navigate those storms in a calm way. Remember, I was trying to be invisible. So there was a way in which I would kind of shrink. But my point in sharing that is I wasn't out there falling apart and making tantrums and making it about me. I was getting quiet. And that has actually served me really well, because now as somebody that has gone through multiple crises organizationally and has shepherded communities through several of these crises in various roles that I've had in my career, the ability to get quiet is actually a strength. Because in that, and I refer to this as being the quiet leader, right? How do you actually get quiet enough, pause, instead of reacting, which is what the tendency is to do. When there's crisis, everybody freaks out and everybody wants to react. But in the reaction, there is a need to respond immediately, right? But there's also such a need for us as leaders to pause and to go inward. And in going inward, be able to reconnect to what I call your inner harbor of safety. Because we as leaders are not immune to the impact of the storm happening around us, right? And some of us, if we're not self-aware, we tend to default to old coping reactions that actually don't serve us. And I was talking about this yesterday, how when I'm back in one of my previous roles, I would default to hiding in my office when things were stressful organizationally. That was like my safe space. It was my little cave. And I ended up spending so much time in my office that one of my colleagues one day, I was walking through the hallway, I was going from a meeting back to my office to work on my computer. And he's like, "Hey, Dr. Ato, how are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm great, thanks. How are you?" Walking, like not even really looking to engage in a conversation because I was so focused. And he said, "Are you sure you're okay, Dr. Ato?" And I stopped and I said, I mean, I'm actually really stressed out, Danny. I have a lot going on. He goes, "Well, Dr. Ato, I noticed that you spend a lot of time in your office." And he goes, we're here together. We're in this together. And it would be nice if sometimes if you want to just come hang out with us, to just come hang out, right? And I looked at him and I thought, okay, he's telling me something more deeply that I need to process later. But I said thank you, and I went back to my office. I'm isolating myself because that's been an old coping reaction of mine, and I'm doing it now unconsciously in my workplace. And if he hadn't reflected that to me, I would have kept doing it. But it became a moment for me to realize that all of us have that reactive tendency when we are under crisis, when we're under stress. If we don't pause to look inward and reflect on how we are doing emotionally, we can't connect to that inner harbor of safety, then we are just staying in reaction mode. And reaction mode serves nobody. It just doesn't, because we're acting unconsciously. But if we can recenter, we can find ways to ground ourselves. And I call it your inner harbor of safety because that is what our nervous systems need first. Are we safe? Okay. In our situation with the storm that we're facing right now, the default response is we're not safe. What we're being fed by the media, by our politicians, we're not safe. We're not safe. Watch out. You can't even feel safe with another human being anymore. We are being programmed to believe that we are no longer safe as humans. But it's bullshit. You always have the ability to create safety within yourself. And if you don't fight for that safety within yourself, that is your sovereign right. That is yours. You get to do what you need to get your nervous system to chill out. When your nervous system is calm, your brain can then orient out of fight or flight mode, which is what we're being bombarded with. And in that, you can go back to that place of peace and clarity. And this is where you connect to your spiritual intelligence. And through that, this is what is called your gut. It's called your instinct, right? It's what allows you to see ahead as a leader. This is what we need to connect back to in these moments. And in that, you can then lead from within the storm. You're not trying to avoid it. You're not trying to pretend it's not there. You are consciously stepping into the storm, to the heart of it, which is the eye of the storm. And that is where you become the calm center from which you can then lead your community to a higher ground.
Wow. MBAs certainly do not teach this.
No.
And this is
No.
what we need more than ever. And this is the heart and soul of leadership. It's the so-called soft stuff that I've always said is actually the flippin' hard stuff.
Yeah. Yep.
And wow, so much richness in that, Gladys. Thank you for sharing with such passion, because this is exactly what our leaders need right now. And we're all needing to be leaders, actually. It's not just about a title. Every single one of us are needing to lead from that eye of the storm.
Yeah.
The way you see it and your take on leadership, what is the kind of, apart from what you've explained right now, what is the kind of leadership we need right now to move us into this new era and into the future? Because there's this beautiful opportunity for us as humanity to move into a gorgeous and beautiful future of substance. What do we need?
Yeah. I'll break it down into a couple of things. Number one, and I'll share my philosophy. The foundation that I operate from is that the best leaders have two common traits. They are self-aware and they're emotionally intelligent. Every client that works with me, anyone who I mentor, they hear this over and over and over again. Okay. So starting there, right? Our leaders need to invest in their own emotional intelligence. They need to know who they are, what their triggers are, where their prejudices are, how they can overcome that in service of bringing community together, of establishing deeper connections, be motivated, right? Be able to stay optimistic. This is leadership. Leadership is not just being able to make decisions fast in moments, to get everything going and holding people accountable. The old paradigm of leadership, and in my opinion, is crumbling. And it's crumbling because it's no longer going to serve us for what we need in the future. So that's one part, right? Self-awareness, emotional intelligence. Now, secondly, what kind of leaders do we need for the future? This depends on what kind of future you believe we're stepping into. I am a firm believer that we are stepping into a future of constant unknowns. So the instability that we're feeling right now, it's going to continue. The storm that we're in, it will sustain itself. However, it's not a storm that your home, right? It is about us. There's a beautiful quote, and I'm going to mess it up, but I think it says something like, the goal isn't to, I'm going to ruin it. It's something about learning how to dance in the rain. It's a really beautiful quote. but the point of it is we need to learn how to step into the unknown, the uncertainty, chaos, and learn how to adapt in it. Right? So from that standpoint, we actually are in a really powerful place of being able to co-create a new style of leadership. And this is what my work is about, is we don't know what leadership needs to be for the future. And those of us that are saying what it should be, they're likely holding on to what it was, right? We actually need a clearing out. And we need to let the question of what does leadership look like in the future actually remain a question. And now, how do we come up with ideas of what it can be? And this is why I say it's time for us to co-create a new style of leadership, because it's not up to one person.
Yes.
Okay. It's not up to somebody that has title of president of anything, whether it's president of a country or president of an organization. It really is about us as community being able to collaborate and identifying what our needs are going to be in an uncertain future, and letting those needs dictate how it is that we can best show up and support each other to a new way of evolving as humans. And, not going down the rabbit hole too much, but I think this also really involves us looking at our children. Because right now, I know what happens in crisis. We get tunnel vision, love bug. And in getting tunnel vision, we lose sight of certain things, right? Because we're just fixated on the crisis in front of us. It's important to look at our children, and in recognizing that they're being born into a brand new world that we can't identify with, that we start to really listen to them and start to observe them and understand what are their needs and how do we use that to inform the ways that we then start to shape this new style of leadership together.
Sure. I love the co-creating and also that you've bridged the children with the elders, and then how we sort of come to a middle path, because it's probably going to be that middle way that helps us move to the next level. What I'm hearing as well here is through this EQ and leading in this eye of the storm is you have to know your truth. And so talk to me a little bit about how do you find your truth? Because if you're going to lead and you're going to move forward, and we're constantly reinventing and finding our way and navigating through uncertainty, something has to stay stable, and that be who we are at our core. So how do you help people find their truth?
Yeah, I really love, Carmen, taking people through an experiential process with this. And this is actually what I've created in my Eye of the Storm Masterclass, is the ability to guide people through that process of reflecting inward so that they can establish that inner harbor of safety, tap into their intuition, and then be able to lead from that place with their communities. But how do we get to our truth? Your truth is your intuitive wisdom. The one thing that I think has been missing is the bridging of our spiritual intelligence with our physical intelligence. We have been over celebrated for our intelligence here, our intellect. So how do you tap into your intuition? This is a process that I like to take people through, because it's going to be different for everybody. It's not like, okay, it's 5 minutes, you're going to figure out where your intuition is. But things that I'm noting about people who are very spiritually tapped in, right? People who do lead from their intuitive knowing, their intuition comes effortlessly. You don't think your way to intuiting. You actually already know. It's your knowing, right? And one exercise that I do with folks is to think about our current situation right now, right? If you fast forward to the last day of your life, what do you want to have contributed in this time of big change? What would you feel proud knowing that you did or didn't do, that you said or didn't say, that you acted on or didn't act on, that you felt or didn't feel? And let that be a place to just get clear on the fundamentals of what's important for you. And then from there, be able to establish that practice of listening, getting quiet, pausing. This is why pausing is so important, to go inward and listen. What feels the best right now? And this is something that I teach my students, is your intuition comes through your emotional experience. So we don't want to make this a big, complicated process. We want you to be able to use your intuition in real time. Always default to, what's a decision that I can make right now that will bring more joy in this moment? Doesn't mean you're solving the world's problems, but rather, how do you shift your emotional landscape from one end of the spectrum to the other? And in that, you will have a greater eagle-eye view to allow for more decision-making, more opportunities, more options, more solutions. But without the pausing and getting quiet and going within and being curious about what is already in there, you're going to miss so many chances to really lead from a place of intuitive knowing.
What I love about what you're saying is that's exactly how life has become right now. Instead of leaders looking to the future and 3 months and 6 months and 12 months from now, it's almost like daily we have to go into this place of pause. And what's going to bring joy today? What's going to take me forward today? And because tomorrow things may be different. And so we've got to become quite okay with the fact that gone are the days of quarterly and annually change, things changing up. We've got to be okay with daily change. And I can imagine our kids, like you've said, is going to come up growing into this place of constant flux, and really hoping that they will develop incredible skills and maybe teach the elders how to do it.
Yeah. It's I know that we all have our different philosophies and opinions about what these times mean. And that's, we have that right? And so this may not resonate for all, but for those who does, for those who who it does resonate for, then you'll get it. What we are being called to do right now in this climate is connect to our truth. What are the fundamentals of our core that are unshakable, right? And we're doing that on an individual and a collective level. So anything that we've swept under the rug, anything that we've put in the closet because we don't want to look at it, it's all coming out right now. Okay. And that is a beautiful opportunity if you choose to see it that way. Right? It doesn't mean it's easy, but the ease that you will find, the more accustomed you are to addressing what you don't want to look at, that is what we're all being led to. And when we can look at our emotional landscape with openness and curiosity and actually use it to our advantage, that is where we can make the most powerful decisions as leaders for our organization, for our country, for our world. But again, go back to right now, all truths are being revealed. All truths are being revealed. And in that, we get to reorient to the truths that we now know we want to carry forward, the truths that have been revealed that show us what no longer can sustain us, right? Because there's all the shadows are coming out. But if we don't look at that and do the work of healing, we will not be able to enter into this future and actually find the freedom that is going to be given to us. We can't find that expansion and joy because our future is actually going to be really amazing. But you got to do this work first. Otherwise, you're going to be dragging all of this stuff with you and the future is going to be really hard.
Absolutely. It's like we've been given this opportunity to really take a strong wake up and a reset. And that's why I see the future as rich because of the process we've been forced to go through a process. It's not even, it's not a choice anymore of should we evolve? Should we think differently? Should we find our truth? Should we reset ourselves? It's here. What are we going to do with it? And for those who choose to do that, there can be so much richness within the uncertainty. So, this whole show is about bringing humanity back into business so that we can overcome all these barriers. What does that look like for you? How do you interpret that?
Well, I mean, to me, it's always bringing the heart back, and the heart represents our emotions. It represents our spiritual intelligence. It really is focusing on how do you collaborate? How do you really co-create as community? And in order to do that, you got to help your community feel safe. They have to make them feel open and connected. And that is where the trust comes. And it takes us back to the simpleness of how do you start a new friendship, right? I think the days of us being so mechanical and robotic, hi, I'm your boss, and we got to have really strict boundaries around us. Those days are fading away. And there's ways that it's served at that time against the backdrop that we were in, globally, socially, politically. But now we're in a different time. And what's being called of us is to soften. And in the softening, that is where we get to go back to our heart and be able to understand that when you lead from the heart, you're not being wishy-washy, you're not being uncool, you're not being undisciplined or strategic, but rather you're harnessing an area that you've been denying in leadership, which is your spiritual intelligence. You're bringing that in, combining it with your physical intelligence. And so you're actually amplifying your ability to be a more effective leader. And I think that is all in service of really honoring that we are all on this journey together. We're all here on the same planet. So bringing humanity back to business is an opportunity to really remember that our priority is each other because we're all heading to the same destination as well, right? So we might as well learn how to make that journey a lot more enjoyable and empowering for everybody, not just for a select few.
Thank you for that. Tell me what you believe our world could look like if we encompass all these beautiful things that you've spoken about right now. What do you think we'd have that we don't have now? What's the thing that would be?
Yeah. The first word that came to mind is freedom.
Oh, wow.
Which may sound very, I ironic compared to what we don't have right now, right? Because that's what we are grieving, is we've lost so much of our freedom. But Peter Diamandis, he co-wrote a book with Stephen Kotler called The Future is Faster Than You Think. And what I love about Peter's work is that he is such a proponent of the amazingness that our future is bringing. But if you think about it, right, a lot of us, and especially like for my family comes from poverty. So a lot of my family members, they do manual labor. They work physically with their bodies until their bodies can't work anymore. And then they have no job, and then they're struggling financially. This has been a pattern generationally for so many people, where they just did something for their career or their work just to get money, but they suffered through it all. Mm. Imagine, with all the technological advances that are happening, if these jobs of manual labor could be replaced with robotics, with AI. Imagine what that would free you up to do. Now, the first thought usually is fear, because now I don't have money, I can't rely on that job. But once you go to the other end of the emotional landscape, what would be possible? Mm. What's your passion? What do you love to create? And this is where we are all being led to, is really asking these deeper questions. What would I love to do in my life if I was given the opportunity? And then we need to provide people with the entrepreneurial knowledge of how they can take that and bring in revenue, so they can pay their bills. But our future is changing so rapidly. Money, the construct of money, is changing as we know it, right? So even that, we might go back to a bartering system for all we know. But it all comes back to, what do I have that I value, that I would want to share with others, and have an exchange of value, so that there is value then brought back into my life. That's the simplest way of looking at it. And this is a future that I believe we're stepping into, which means we have more freedom to dream, to create, to actually step into doing things each day that are more fulfilling. And I do understand this is a very simplistic explanation, because there's layers below that, right? What about education? Who has access to education? What about all the racism? What about the systemic ways in which people are prevented? We all are in that same exact space of needing to address all of that. But it doesn't mean we cannot go to that place of possibility, right? This is the understand where you're at, where you want to be, and then how do we close the gap? And this is the opportunity that I think we're all being given, which is really, really exciting.
Absolutely. And it's that expansion that you were speaking about. It's take this moment to pause. Take this moment to see what the universal mirror is showing us, and collaborate, co-create, find a way for us to move into this new space. And if we just let the acceptance come, as you said, of where we're at, and that this is actually a moment of opportunity and a moment of so much. Well, we can harvest the opportunity, but we've got to see it. We've got to see the balance, like you said. Yeah. Wow, so much stuff here. Gladys, I could speak with you the entire day. Tell me, you spoke about rituals a little earlier. Give us an example of a ritual that works for you, that keeps you so effervescent.
I'll tell you my morning ritual, actually. And this is something that I've been doing all year. And it happened because of Lovebug. I know we started with my little love of my life, and so it feels appropriate to end with her. She got diagnosed with inflammatory bowel disease, and her health declined significantly at the beginning of this year. And I was very concerned. I mean, she was. And one process that I've had is looking at my relationship to death. And even though I wrote a book about the good goodbye, it doesn't mean that I've been comfortable with saying goodbye to the ultimate, goodbye, which is somebody dying. And so the ritual that I've created as a result of Lovebug is, as soon as I wake up in the morning, I'm very, very adamant about all of us, and this is just a quick tip for the audience. As soon as you wake up in the morning, identify how you feel. Immediately identify what's the feeling, and then pin it. Don't obsess about it. Don't think about it. Don't try to ruminate about it. Don't try to fix it. Just pin it for later. go to a place of gratitude immediately, something that helps you really feel expansive and joyful and soft. And I do this with Lovebug. Every morning when I wake up, the first thing that I say is, thank you so much, Lovebug, for choosing to spend another day of life with me. I'm so grateful to you, and I'm so grateful to God for giving me another day of life with you. And that gets me in that energy of like, we get another day together and we're going to have so much fun. So I'm literally bounding out of bed with that joy, right? And I did it because of her. But what I didn't realize, because she was ill, she didn't want to get out of bed. She was in pain. And I was so anxious that I was going to lose her, that anxiety was feeding more anxiety for her. And so this became a way to really break it, but also make peace with it. And there's a long story behind how I got here. But from there, get out of bed in the morning, do something to really get your body moisturized with flow, right? And for a lot of us, you know, we hear all the time exercise. Okay. I get it. I've not been one to jump on the meditation bandwagon or the exercise bandwagon very easily. But what I have loved is first thing after we get out of bed, I put on my hiking shoes and I go out for a hike. And it doesn't matter if it's for half an hour, 20 minutes, an hour, I just get out. And because I'm so fortunate to live in nature, it's been a big blessing for me to actually root down, because I'm earthing in that moment and I'm being exposed to all of nature's elements. And that to me is so important, to just get fresh air from nature. So if you live in a city and you can take a walk around the block, if there's a park nearby, these are the things that I would highly advise that you do in the morning to just start your day off a little bit more smoothly and then ease into the routine. Even for those who are parents, right? I know there's something that you can do if you allow yourself to think out more creatively, that can involve your kids going on that walk with you, just something to allow you to earth, to ground, and then starting your day from that inner harbor of safety, being connected to it, and then being able to go on with your business.
Beautiful. I feel like I have an inner harbor of safety right now, just listening to you.
Thank you, Carmen.
Final question. If you could speak to all 7 billion people on our planet right now, what is the message you would love to share?
This message, actually a friend of mine, Kirk Nugent, reminded me, and it's to thine own self be true. This is, when he said it, we were in a conversation just about these times and how, you know, what we're experiencing. And when he said that, I thought, you know what, this is what I can anchor in anything, because what are we being asked of ourselves right now is to honor our truth, right? What are we needing to do right now? Go back to ourselves and balance our emotional spectrum, right? Really expand our landscape of understanding of what's possible for us. And this means that what's important to you, what might be different from others, no longer allowing yourself to accommodate others before you, no longer allowing yourself to shrink down so that others can have their way, no longer ignoring the things that are calling you, whether it's a creative idea, a new business endeavor, an ending of a friendship, anything that feels out of alignment. The only way you can address it is if you're true to you. So to thine own self be true feels like the most powerful thing that I could offer to the world if given a chance to speak to all 7 billion people at once.
Wow. Amen to that. Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much, Gladys. It feels like you bring this perfect balance. It feels like I've had a vitamin B shot, and at the same time, I've got this inner safety inner harbor of safety. So how the hell you do those two incredibly extreme things all at once is just the magic that you bring to this world. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing these beautiful, deep, powerful insights with us. And just for the magnificence of you and everything that you bring and what you're doing for so many very blessed and privileged people who come under your mentorship. Thank you so much for just being the special, effervescent person that you are. And to all those out there, if you please buy the book, Good Goodbye. And Gladys, how can we get hold of you? What's the best way?
So folks can buy the book on Amazon. Look up Gladys Ato, ATO, and the Good Goodbye, and you'll find it there. And then, if you really want to understand more about my own leadership style and what I'm doing with my communities right now to co-create a new style of leadership, I would invite you to become part of my my world online. And you can do that a couple ways. You can subscribe at drgladysato.com. So drgladysato.com. And I provide a lot of value there to my email subscribers, because I know you guys get inundated with a ton of stuff, but I want this to be high quality, high value, high implementation. Okay, I want you to be taking the things you learn from me and applying them to your community. But also social media. That's a place where I also share a lot of my teachings. So you can find me on Facebook and Instagram, Gladys Ato.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here with us today. And please be sure to check Gladys out, follow her. If you want a little bit more of this amazing bubbles every single day, be sure to connect with her. I believe that we're in a golden reset phase globally right now. And as business leaders, we have this absolute privileged opportunity to rewrite the way in which we do business. And in collaboration, as Gladys has so beautifully reminded us, in collaboration and through co-creation, we absolutely can write a new human story. So let's make it happen.